All right. It's been a couple minutes. I think a few people will likely probably be still flowing in, but I think we'll kick off. This will be recorded, so if anyone wants to watch it afterwards or share it with your network, please feel free to do so. Really excited to kick off this conversation today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking the time as we accelerate into summer to have this really important conversation. I'm Melissa Lefebvre-Schkopitz. I'm the head of global partnerships and growth with the Responsible AI Institute. And today we are going to be having a dynamic conversation about the impacts of AI on our ESG and overall sustainability goals. I really started thinking about this intersection a few years ago now when I had to grapple with what does responsible AI actually mean? Obviously, the definition of responsible AI and the requirements of both AI and ESG are evolving, but what really became apparent to me is, can we call AI responsible if we're not considering the wider holistic impact on our environment, on our people, and then how we govern our organizations? So dove into this intersection and this conversation over the past few years. I'm not sure I knew how much I was biting off, but luckily we have a variety of very smart and passionate people in this space. So when we think about what this looks like, we have to think about how the large energy and water requirements for LLMs and general purpose AI models are being considered. We have to think about the social impacts on people, from bias and hiring to, task replacement and job replacement with AI. And further to this, it was really interesting because investors, VCs, people considering investments in AI are asking us and having conversations around, what are the proper considerations and incentives as it relates to AI and ESG and sustainability? Because for every positive impact of AI, there seems to be a consideration or a trade-off that we need to consider. So, it's dynamic, it's emerging, and responsible AI and ESG are both emerging topics with emerging definitions, requirements that can sometimes be contentious and are really evolving fast. So, having a view on both of these things is no small feat. It's too big of a topic to cover, even in the function of this panel or in this 5-minute intro. So we recently published a white paper just this morning. I encourage you to all check it out. Patrick's just put it in the chat, which is fantastic. And Andrea, one of our lead authors and the co-founder of the initiative, is on the call to talk a little bit more about it today too. So excited to kick off the conversation with this passionate group. I guarantee you we will not have all of the answers, but I think that diving into this complexity and thinking through the mental models, the critical thinking, and the insights and the nuggets that you'll take away to approach this in your own context will come through. So please do put your questions in the chat, as Patrick has mentioned. I will save time at the end to address audience questions. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves, their roles, and how they fit into this conversation. And we'll start in an order of Andrea, Boris, Leah, and then Parveen. Thanks, everyone.
Lisa. Thank you, Lisa, very much. Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to have a very exciting conversation, as Alisa was mentioning, about two mega trends that are converging. I'm Andrea Rotolo. I'm the global head of the customer sustainability team at Rockwell Automation, and excited to be here to talk about my two passions, sustainability and AI.
Hey everybody, excited to be here. I'm Boris Gamazechkov. I work on Salesforce's sustainability team. So I think about how we drive climate action. And so Salesforce has been working on artificial intelligence for nearly a decade. And we also have trust, equality, and sustainability as our core values. So it's natural for us to have really thought deeply about responsible AI, from everything from bias, security to sustainability. So I'm excited to dive into this topic that's really near and dear to my heart.
Hi, folks. It's great to be here today. My name is Leah. I'm the Senior Director of the Velocity Program at Radical Ventures, which is an early-stage venture capital fund investing in AI-first companies out of Palo Alto, Canada, here in Toronto, and also in London, UK. We invest globally. I'm the creator of what we call our Responsible AI Startups Framework, or RAISE framework, and this is a early stage investment framework I'll talk about a little bit later today. But I think about the direct impact of developing AI technologies and the role of the private sector in supporting researchers who then become entrepreneurs and develop the technology that we're all using and is changing the way that we live, work, and play today. So I'm really excited to talk about that. Thanks for having me, Alyssa.
Hello, everyone. My name is Praveen Chandran. I help lead our climate data and technology practice at KPMG. We sit at the intersection of sustainability, data, analytics, AI, and we assist our clients with across their journey as they look to become more sustainable. So how do they use insights to measure action? How do they report? How do they offer low carbon solutions? So there's a data element to various facets, and AI is increasingly becoming a part of that. So we're working with a range of customers across sectors, and you'll hear some of those perspectives come through. Thanks to all of you for joining, and look forward to this discussion.
Amazing. So as you see, we have like a powerhouse group of experts from different perspectives here. So I'm confident that it's going to be a dynamic conversation. We've encouraged everyone to just make it conversational as well, but we are going to kick it off with our first question to all of the panelists. So listen, people come to us and they're like, it is very noisy out there. Navigating how to implement AI responsibility is challenging and complex. So now we have to consider sustainability and ESG. Why is this crucial? I think people are kind of already a little bit overwhelmed with all of the considerations of how to implement AI responsibly. But I want to have a conversation, just talk about why we should all care and what is at stake here when we consider AI, sustainability, and our ESG goals. So I'll start with Leah. Leah, why should we care? Why is this an important topic?
Yeah, absolutely, Alyssa. So I think level setting, like given the option of good AI or AI that doesn't contribute to emissions and doesn't harm anyone, and a bad AI that is polluting and causing negative impacts on our society, I think no one is arguing that we should pursue the bad AI. That is just not what we're doing here. So it's a much more difficult conversation than that, because it's obvious that we want to be pursuing the best version of this technology. And it's not all about commercial value. And so focusing on the sustainability and environment question, I think, is really important. When we think about an iPhone battery, for instance, that needs about 3 hours to fully charge and uses about 5 watts an hour. But once that phone is fully charged, the router connecting it to the internet, the energy needed to write, send, and store the message, you have a lot of different pieces that are all connecting for you and that other person. And if you add AI into the mix, so you use a large language model to craft that email, it's really hard to quantify exactly how much energy is needed per query, let alone how much was used to train that model. So we have companies in Radical Ventures portfolio that are working on this problem, but there are also researchers such as Dr. Sasha Luciani that are also working to solve this problem. And we can get into the estimates of just how much energy it takes. But on the other side, this technology is also solving grand challenges. So we have the AlphaFold protein folding problem that has stood for half a century or more, and all of collective humanity figured out the structures of about 180,000 proteins. And we with AlphaFold have now every single pretty much protein folded and the structure of them available to date, which really means that we're able to discover new classes of antibiotics and solve problems like plastic pollution, so creating new enzymes so that they can break down plastics. So you have this dichotomy of a technology that is simultaneously contributing a lot to the problem, but also it's not so easy to just say, slow down, don't use it, because we're also solving massive, massive problems for humanity already.
Boris, I know this is like a huge amount of passion for you. So what is at stake here from your perspective? And, why do you think that this is an important topic to grapple with now?
Yeah. The science is clear. I think we can all look out in our backyards and sky. You've seen, you might be in an area where the summers are at record highs. We're in a climate crisis now. And scientists are telling us that to mitigate the worst impacts, that 1.5 C degree threshold, we need to cut emissions immediately. The longer we wait, the more CO2 will be in the atmosphere, causing additional warming. And every ton of CO2 that we emit today is going to continue being up there. We're currently on track for about 2.7 degrees of warming Celsius. It's less than the 8 degrees projected prior to Paris, but we're still off from that 1.5 threshold. So in enters generative AI. I mentioned Salesforce and a lot of other companies have been using AI one or another way for decade plus. The difference with the rise of generative AI is the size of these models and the significant amount of compute required to train and then deploy these models. So compute translates to energy, usually carbon, and then water use as well. And so some forecasts have shown that data center, so AI models are run in these data centers. Data center electricity consumption might quadruple by the end of this decade. And you can imagine that this is totally counter to what science is telling us our planet needs to do. And so from a global perspective, that there's a big concern. And also from a regional perspective, there's certain areas where that are hotspots for data centers. And those areas, due to the forthcoming construction of new data centers for AI workloads, they're having to either not shut down coal power plants or bring online potentially new natural gas plants. I saw this troubling statistic. Right now, the largest data center in the world is 150 megawatts in Inner Mongolia. There are currently 15 data centers projected to be built by AI labs, kind of currently on the books for the future that are each bigger than 150 megawatts. So I think there is a very real near-term risk here in exacerbating climate change. And I do see that there is more of a long-term perspective with a lot of the AI developers and AI companies. And there are a lot of potential solutions, but I think we need to be more mindful around the types of AI we are using, because research has shown that there could be a 6,000-fold difference between the most polluting model, as Leah said, and the most efficient model. And obviously, there's slightly different tasks, but from my perspective, that the general public and even general technologists are not aware of that difference. They think the cloud is this ephemeral space that can just be used. But I think we need much more transparency, much more mindfulness here.
No, that's fantastic. And another thing that I've been reading a lot about is where these data centers are being built and potentially water taxed or other already constrained global south environments. So thinking about what the disparate impact might be as well. Andrea, I know you've said this is a huge amount of passion of yours, so I feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I say, why should we care? But tell me a little bit about your perspective on this.
Absolutely. So what I'm seeing in the world is the following. I'm seeing that enterprises are integrating AI, and they are doing it by pilot projects. And I think that's absolutely the wrong approach. It's a death by 1,000 pilots. And by implementing pilots, actually what they are doing is looking at optimize one or a few metrics at a time, which puts us all at risk of missing the big picture of the impact that AI can have. So let me give you an example. If you have a team that's looking to optimize energy usage and you use AI to do that, that may look like a positive environmental impact that you are generating because you have optimized your energy usage. But if you're looking just at the energy metric, that looks like a positive impact. Now, if in the process you are firing all the employees that were doing this optimization manually, now you're having a negative social impact. So the question is, have we built a more or a less sustainable future? And the truth is that no one knows. And that's why Alisa and I and 50 other leaders embarked on this massive journey of looking at what could be the key questions to look at the broader picture of the impact that AI can have on our sustainable future. So the call here is that the C-suite of corporations look at integrating their AI governance process with their sustainability process to ensure that any AI application that we that they implement in their corporations is driving not only productivity, but also sustainability. And not sustainability one metric at a time, but looking at the overall picture of it. Because what I expect is that if they don't take this approach, longer term, they are going to see reputational damage. Companies risk public backlash if their AI practices are seen as unsustainable or unethical. And I think that's going to become evident over time. And then I think missed opportunities. When you do things the right way, actually you will be scaling the right way as well. And you will have the support not only of your employees, but also of the market. So it might be a little bit more complicated to do it right at first, but I encourage the C-suite of corporations to take this approach so that we can all ensure that they are driving both, again, productivity and sustainability.
No, fantastic. I really first started thinking about how AI could help, not necessarily with sustainability, but I live in an area that has a ton of summer wildfires, and looking at AI for resource allocation to most effectively fight wildfires. Now that feels like a little bit too little too late, but it really became apparent to me a lot of the opportunities and benefits with AI as well. So Praveen, you work a lot in this space with a variety of sectors. Can you share some case studies or examples where AI has significantly contributed to achieving sustainability or ESG goals, and maybe where they've traded off? Where has it helped and where has it hurt? And potentially, if you can talk about Little Brother's S&G as well as the environmental impacts as well.
Yeah, and maybe what I'll do is just add a few flavors of S&G onto what the previous topic. So agree with everything the panelists said, and I think data centers are top of mind. We have, or at least I have, some cause for optimism given what the Salesforces and the Googles and the Metas have done, being able to decarbonize or reduce emissions associated with their data centers. And given what our energy clients are doing as it relates to permitting and getting prepared for this massive boom. So we're taking the optimistic side of that. Now, in terms of social, there are some elements that we have made part of our trusted AI pillar. So part of that is just the ability to manage, to govern the data, the models, and the output, so that people can fundamentally believe in the results and are comfortable with it. Survey after survey has shown that that is a challenge amongst consumers and even our clients that are potentially delivering the insights. So that's one piece of what we're doing. Another one that I think we all talk about a little bit is the impact on the workforce. So there's appeal to the notion of productivity gains translates into people working on value-added activities. Theoretically, that sounds good, but in practice, we don't really know how that plays out. Some sectors may be disproportionately affected. Some people, despite all their interests and efforts, it may not be straightforward for them to shift into that role. So if you've been spending your entire life interpreting PDF documents and putting it into Excel, it's not easy to flip a switch and just start innovating, right? And so a lot of what we're doing at KPMG is to help our corporate clients think about how to transition to that new world and think about how to provide the training, the upskilling, and even organizing so that we get the benefits that Leah talked about without some of the downside impacts to our workforce, to the broader economy as a whole. So just wanted to add that. In terms of real use cases, and agree 100% with what Andrea is saying. There's a lot happening, and there are a lot of ways that AI can drive sustainability. So we talked about the sustainability of AI. I'll talk about how AI can drive sustainability. And I'll cover three areas. The first are the analytics and the insights, what I think Leah was alluding to, that are fundamentally built on machine learning models or neural networks. Those have been happening, I'd say, for about the last 5-6 years. So Google has pilots where they can optimize the settings of wind turbines to maximize efficiency. IBM is doing things where they're pulling in their weather data, adding it into watsonx, and basically able to gauge the climate risk or the impacts to cities, to critical infrastructure. We ourselves are we've invested in an MIT-based startup called Context Labs. They pull in data from satellite imagery and other IoT sensors that can be used for a variety of low carbon solutions. So that is something that's happening now, has been happening, and we expect over the next 3 to 5 years, you'll see, like as Andrew was alluding to, these higher level decisions. When companies, entities are investing hundreds of billions of dollars, right? How can we optimize that and get the most bang for our buck so we reduce from 2.7 to 2.6 to hopefully eventually 1.5? So that's one area. The second area is the productivity gains. So Gen AI, we all see it, we all use it. Many of our clients are now utilizing Gen AI in the world of ESG. A few examples. If you look at ESG reporting, there are paragraphs and paragraphs and pages of regulation. There are all the things that a company is physically doing, and there's all the math that needs to be done. It's a perfect problem for Gen AI. We've got a solution. Boris's colleagues are working on something that help actually significantly streamline that effort. That's going to continue to accelerate. And when Andrea's, the point she made takes hold, a lot of ESG folks are ready to plug into that overall broader architecture that enables mass automation. So those are a couple areas. The third and final that I'll talk about is how businesses fundamentally transform themselves in terms of the way they deliver services. The poster child, and I'm sure Salesforce and Boris can talk about this too, but Tesla, right? Very controversial company, a lot going on, right? But if you look at their augmented, their augmented driving system, that is a massive neural network, right? One that's been trained over 5 or 6 or 8 years by every vehicle that's on the road, right? Every car on the road is constantly training that model. And is it perfect? No. Are we all ready to take our hands off the steering wheel? No. But it's very, very powerful. And if you had asked many of us like 10, 15 years ago to imagine a car that could switch lanes by looking 4 cars ahead, 5 cars behind, and doing like that, we would have said that's science fiction, right? But it's real. And with Gen AI, we expect that to accelerate over the coming years. So the 3 areas, it's very exciting, and I think you'll see a lot of acceleration in the coming years.
Fantastic. I'm gonna ask Andrea, like we've been kind of diving into this for the past year, over a year or so, and I'm curious, are you seeing organizations actually grappling with this? Like have you seen like the maturity around the landscape of looking at this holistically and considering the trade-offs? And if not, where should someone start? Like where would someone inside an organization say, like, this is the right way to look at this, and here are the types of things we should consider? Leah, I would love to hear the perspective as well from more of that startup landscape to follow.
Thank you, Lisa. So starting with a few data points here, KPMG survey found that 55% of CEOs globally believe that AI will significantly impact their ESG performance within the next 3 years, which is, I think, quite an interesting number. And that the World Economic Forum also showed that 76% of companies are planning to increase their investments in AI with a strong focus on ESG-related applications. The world is waking up to the fact that AI can help advance their ESG goals. Now, another study by the Alan Turing Institute found that only 29% of organizations have a formal strategy for addressing the ethical implications of AI. Now, ethics and definitions, all that gets a bit challenging, but one could say that if we are looking to build a more sustainable world, following the ESG frameworks that we have today, that is to follow ethics and to take care of the environment and people and governance structures to ensure that we will have a better future. So it's interesting to see all these numbers and the discrepancies there. I personally don't see this holistic approach. And Alisa, this is based on our experience. We reached out to the world and we said, we want to look into this. We were the first leadership working group in the world looking into how to integrate responsible AI governance within the ESG framework. And what we discovered, and Alisa, please feel free to add your perspective here, but what we found was that there were counted probably with one hand the amount of leaders that have actual experience both in the sustainability space and in the AI space. And that's one of the major challenges we are having right now. People are not connecting the dots yet. They are talking about, for example, the implications of AI on the environmental metrics or on jobs, but they are looking at things separately. They are not having this holistic approach to the implications of AI across ESG. That's why we published a paper, and we are hoping that the audience is going to review it and give us feedback. Now, the approach that I would recommend organizations take is first, stop your pilot projects right now and look at all the projects that you have going on in your company and see if there are discrepancies. See if one is impacting in a negative way a metric within the sustainability framework, what are the trade-offs, right, of the positive impact and the negative impact. Then set clear goals and targets. Then implement best practices for sustainable AI development. Look at what kind of AI are you using and the implications to your workforce, and create a plan to upskill your workforce. Otherwise, what you are going to get is a workforce that's pushing back, that is not collaborating in the development and implementation of AI because they can see their job is going to be replaced and there's not a plan for upskilling. And then finally, what I would add is you should transparently report on progress and engage with your company, with your stakeholders. Create innovation hubs. Say, look, we are looking to improve this particular metric, or what are your ideas? And have that platform open to all your companies so that everyone can provide their feedback on what they see as potential risks of the implementation of this and potential solutions as well. I think that's the best way to approach change. Involve your people, trust in them, and remove silos. And please stop your pilot projects.
Leah, I want to hear your thoughts. In terms of stopping pilot projects, I think there is a race to make sure that people are competitive and harnessing the opportunities for AI. So I think what we've heard too is there's a lot of compute and energy and resources used in pilot projects that might not have an opportunity of going forward, not just from a regulatory perspective, but also maybe from an energy consumption perspective. So, looking at pilot projects thoughtfully is definitely a thought. And I know, the startup landscape and the competitive landscape probably looks at this. So, Leah, I'm very curious, how are you seeing some of your founders and some of the others in the space that aren't large organizations approaching this topic?
Yeah, founders are extremely innovative and tenacious people and have a lot on their mind, just from trying to pay their employees and manage a company, let alone like the massive impacts that might be third scope from what they're actually doing today, and don't have the in-house capacity to necessarily have a team dedicated to thinking about this all the time. And artificial intelligence is particularly important when we think about this because it's coming from industry. It is coming from researchers turned entrepreneurs. It is coming from corporate labs. It is not being developed in the academic sphere in the same way that the internet was, for instance. So it's really important that we are focusing on supporting these type of folks who are building out visionary technologies from the ground up. And as large enterprises, you have a huge impact on this because with pilots and procurement, who you're working with and why is really important. And if they can't validate their products with commercial interest, then it's going to be an uphill battle if enterprises simply choose the cheapest products and are not supporting in these types of compute relationships. And beyond that, as venture capitalists and from the venture capital perspective, Radical has always worked with founders who are innovative and really care about this space. A lot of them are quite young. Cohere, for instance, one of our portfolio companies, first did cloud with Google Cloud because of their interest in the environmental aspect that Google was offering at that time. And so that was part of their selection criteria. And so the young people developing this technology do really want to include these considerations. And we even find we invest in companies, and part of our term sheet process is that the companies will develop responsible AI or ethical AI in tandem with us, and that we will support them as the learnings come out as we are all in this together. It's a very dynamic environment. And a lot of our companies themselves are solving the problem as their main business focal point. So Sentinel, one of our companies out of the University of Toronto, they help you be able to train and deploy your own machine learning models while reducing your compute and maintaining your model accuracy. So that helps a lot of our portfolio companies be able to use less compute in these pilots, and then help work with enterprises to make sure that any pilots they are running, they're reducing their compute, also working with the major cloud providers to do it from that end. We also have a company called Orbital Materials, ex-DeepMind, Google DeepMind founder, Jonathan Godwin, and he is based in London, and they're basically building novel solutions for carbon sequestration. So using new materials, breakthrough materials, to be able to do better carbon capture and open up those markets and make that more viable. So I think it's a very ground up approach when you're talking about startups, but we really need cooperation. And there's just things are moving too quickly for these founders to be waiting for the requirements to come from a top-down level. So I already see them thinking about it and figuring out how they can minimize their impact, because they care a lot about these questions.
Yeah, definitely the changing landscape of requirements is a real consideration. And, Boris, I've been following what Salesforce has been doing in this space for a while, and your commitment and leadership as it relates to like decarbonizing the entire life cycle of your technology. So I would love to learn a little bit more from your perspective as being sort of one of the first movers in this space to consider this. Can you share a bit about this as a commitment as part of an overall organizational strategy? And how have you navigated the trade-offs of generative AI and the advantages that come with that? There's so many examples, but the energy thirsty and water thirsty data centers required for some of the compute.
Yeah, so Salesforce in general, we have a number of climate commitments. We're actually currently working on our climate transition plan, that's kind of the latest type of plan that's going to be soon required by the EU in a number of years. We're kind of getting ahead of that. But as part of that, we're thinking about how do we decarbonize our full value chain? So these are scope 1, 2, and even 3, scope 3 emissions. So these are emissions that are further away from your control, but we are working on how do we have this ripple effect where we're working with our suppliers as well as customers on reducing emissions. And so, when it comes to AI, and particularly generative AI, it is really important to consider these trade-offs as we're integrating more and more of these capabilities into our products. It's definitely impacted the way we're doing our energy and emissions forecasting. There's a lot of variables here, but at Salesforce, we've been able to approach this by we're being really mindful about the types of AI models that we are integrating into our product. So we have an in-house AI research team that develops our own large language models. And so we are really focused on developing AI that is tailored to the specific use case. So with a lot of these applications, we're seeing just, the most massive kind of off-the-shelf APIs being integrated into products. And the way I see it is that's like using a semi truck to drive a single person, when something much more efficient and much more specific to that use case could be used. So just recently we put out our it's called the XGen model. It's the world's first LLM specifically for CRM use cases. So we don't want it to necessarily write Shakespearean poetry or do all these other things that these single massive models can do. We have very specific use cases, and these types of models excel at those use cases. And there's also a lot of benefits when it comes to the product experience in terms of lower latency, so a faster response time, more trust, reduced hallucinations, because these models are able to be developed on highly curated data. And so what we end up with is a lower carbon, lower cost product with a better user experience. And just want to emphasize, not all AI is the same. There are these wide, it's this wide umbrella term. As Pravin mentioned, a lot of the innovation around sustainability has been from these deep learning models, like more traditional machine learning. And a lot of the time, the largest Gen AI models are not necessarily the ones that are going to give us the most impactful sustainability solutions. So I think we just need to be really mindful on Yeah, really the underlying type of model that's being used and how we're deploying that for what use cases.
That's such an important point, like AI not being a monolith. And I think we use it as a monolith and this like one big mass of technology, but there are definitely considerations we can make to make them more sustainable. Praveen, I'm curious if you have any additional thoughts about that. And, you work across sectors, and there's some interesting conversations in the chat, especially about the energy sector, around what happens when we're using AI to support, lengthening fossil fuel extraction or those types of things. I don't know if you can see the chat, but I'm just curious, when you think about specific sectors like energy and others, how they're grappling with these trade-offs. And, if we're using AI to extend the life of high emitting assets or helping them run better, are we causing more harm, or is that actually just, a pragmatic trade-off or consideration we need to take when we look at how we're using AI in these areas?
So really good question, and certainly a dynamic that's going to evolve. I'll start with some of the things where AI is enabling progress. So Leah mentioned an example, carbon capture and sequestration. That represents the opportunity, and there are various studies that say we need to sequester about 1 billion tons per year of carbon. It is a very, very expensive proposition. It's unproven. And so there is a lot that we can do with machine learning models to reduce that risk, to bring in the funding to do that. When we talk about grid infrastructure, fundamentally is what do we need to scale renewables? It's the infrastructure, the interconnects, and those are all things, the analysis, the planning around that, again, those are all things that are enabled by AI. And so you have a variety of things that we levers, what I'll call levers to decarbonize, that the energy sector has, but we think will accelerate use of, all right, accelerate use of, so that more broadly, we're less dependent on less clean sources of energy. That's the direction that some of the leaders we see are taking, and some of the companies we've had the chance to work with are doing. Now, is it possible to use AI to proliferate existing infrastructure? Yes, but there are limitations as to what you can do and where. There are mandates throughout the world, and the companies, the buyers ultimately have some input, right? And so there's only, when you're talking about corporations, Salesforce is a great example. They have a lot of leverage, a lot, right? And so it's the same for other tech companies. It's the same for other manufacturers, same for Rockwell. And so the businesses and the consumers, we think, will drive this transition and make the use of insights to proliferate a coal company. Yes, it's going to happen, but far less impactful.
Absolutely. And again, like the point of this panel isn't to come with answers to these really questions, but give us some frameworks or mental models to start to open our brains to some of the trade-offs and considerations. And so it's not an easy question by any means. So thank you for being flexible as I threw that one at you.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So Leah, Radical has, you're one of the world's largest venture funded funds dedicated to exclusively AI, and you developed the Responsible AI for Startups framework in collaboration with Vector Institute to use as part of your internal diligence when considering investment. And you referenced it earlier, but I'm very curious, like what has the reception been to this from startups and founders? As you mentioned, there's a lot that goes on when you're considering scaling up a company, and this might just seem like an additional barrier, but curious how people have been responding, and have ESG metrics been considered as part of this framework, or how have they been built in?
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. We've seen great reaction from it. So it's open sourced. So RAISE, the Responsible AI Startups framework, so Radical, RAISE, RAIS. You can find it on Git. It's open source, and we didn't do that just to be cute. We actually would love for people to take it, play with it, share case studies. We've done workshops with policymakers, with founders, with investors. And the purpose of this is a risk register, providing a familiar framework for guiding investment conversations, particularly at the early stages, around technologies to talk about with artificial intelligence, how it might impact society. So it's not a net new thing. It is looking at understanding how you could actually assign a likelihood and an impact to any kind of particular risk occurring, and then how you actually mitigate that. And that just forces a conversation, an intellectual conversation around some of these either large risks or small risks, and how likely we actually think they are and what we can actually do about that. And if that is something that needs to be built into the fundraising of these companies early on, so that, for instance, if they need to red team, they have the resources to do so. And so we've done this workshop now with lots of different folks. I presented it to about 200 operators in the venture capital ecosystem in Miami this year. And we found a lot of funds looking at it and adopting different versions of it. And so I would love for folks to take a look at it. This is important in the venture capital industry. I mentioned it a little bit before, but when we talk about artificial intelligence, and I really appreciate that Boris has mentioned that it is not a monolith. We can talk about generative AI, particularly transformer-based architectures, which is what a lot of us are talking about, but there's also the application space. But a lot of this technology is coming out of, particularly these machine learning models, industry. And so in 2023, the Stanford AI Index saw that 51 notable machine learning models came out of industry, as opposed to academia contributing about 15. And so that's the kind of scale we're talking about. And so in the venture capital and private capital industry, you're underwriting tomorrow's innovations, and you really need to be thinking about this. And the Googles and the Metas and the OpenAIs of the world at one point were venture funded. So we see that as a huge part of our role in the ecosystem. And we've seen a lot of response from that as well. And so in talking about what actually is involved in the framework, it doesn't map exactly to ESG, but it is very overlapping. And so in terms of what we've categorized it as, we talk about social. So these are socio-technical issues. So what we've done is taken that safety and responsibility discipline literature that already exists and tried to talk about the taxonomy of harms that are already out there. And so we put it under social. We have a separate tab for technical. And so when you talk about environment, that can kind of fall under both, depending what aspect of environment you're talking about. And then we also have a regulatory risk framework, which more so maps to how we're thinking about the regulatory environment shaping up and how companies can match up to that. I see in the chat somebody's asking for the GitHub, and I will share it. So that's a quick on it, but happy to follow up with anybody who's interested.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we've thought a lot about, and Andrea and I have talked about too, is just, following the incentives, like where the money goes is where the investment goes is where the change is really going to happen. So Andrea, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on that topic, but just not to be super cynical about the conversation, but like, as much as it is nice to say, do the right thing, I've learned over the last 3 years at the Institute that you actually have to make a pretty important and compelling business case often to make sure these investments are done properly. And so the incentive of, organizational investment in projects or even, investor funding is really, really critical. And there is a business case for it. So yeah, Andrea, I know you've thought a lot about this, just kind of making sure we follow where the money goes, because that's where the impact will be had.
Exactly. And well, there's good news actually. When you bring together sustainability and digital transformation, of course, including AI, you outperform your peers by 3 times already. That's called, when you bring the two together, that's called doing a twin transformation. So you become a twin transformer. You had 2 teams working in parallel doing this transformation on sustainability. You had this other team doing the transformation on digital and AI. And it's clearly shown, and there are many case studies. You can, if anyone is interested, just send me a note on LinkedIn and I will send you the reports, or Alisa, we can share here. But basically, when you bring the two together, you're outperforming your peers. And the reason why is because you have to report on your ESG progress. And corporations are now shifting their approach from doing this on Excel files and just in a very manual way to looking into reporting using actual operational data. That actual operational data does many things. First, simplifies the reporting. Second, now you have auditable data. So you're de-risking your audits, basically, and you're showing to the market that you know what you're doing, because that data that you're presenting to the market is real operational data. Now, once you have digitized the process for sustainability, you can also add AI engines in the process to optimize your processes as well, right? And so that's how everything comes together. I view, so today corporations that have implemented sustainability practices are outperforming their peers on an average and annual total shareholder return of 3 percentage points, higher than the companies that with a weaker ESG performance. So they are performing better. 4 out of 5 millennials want to work for companies that have a strong ESG commitment. So you're attracting talent. And when you bring together digital transformation and sustainability, you're outperforming your peers by 3 times already. And that's a very conservative number because AI is still evolving, right? So as AI keeps being fed this information on sustainability, we will identify new opportunities to keep improving your operations. What I strongly believe is if you take this approach today, you are going to see a strong talent attraction, a strong market attraction, a strong outperforming your peers by taking this leadership position of knowing that instead of needing 2 parallel teams, you just need to converge these initiatives, and you will see a reduction on cost later on. It's logical, but not many companies have taken this approach yet. So that's why this is a call for leadership. This is a call for the C-suite to take an approach that's integral and holistic in their organization, and to just say, this is the direction, we are going to do it this way because this is the right thing to do, and we know it's going to pay off. And by the way, there are many numbers that today prove it, but they are quite conservative still.
Alicia, can I add to that just 30 seconds?
Of course.
What Andrea said, there's across their 2 points, there's some very important themes. One is there's no real individual that connects AI and sustainability. So a big part of what we do, any sector, telecom, financial services, retail, is we merely just try to connect the CDO or the CIO with the chief sustainability officer. So they have that same dialogue. And the things that she's talking about, that's happening now, right? Using LLMs to classify invoice data so you can do your GHG and scope 3 calculations. That's happening today. So one of the most important things that we emphasize is start those conversations. So when you've got that massive digital transformation taking place now, the 3-year thing, that you're making sustainability intertwined with it. The leading companies are doing that, and they're seeing results, and it's real and it's actionable, that are driving things.
No, absolutely. And we see more and more even data just out of responsible AI, the impacts of profitability and those types of things. And so as more data becomes clear about this, I think, the incentives will align further as well. We have about 10 minutes left. I have one rapid fire provocative question for the panelists for each of you to answer, and then we'll move to the Q&A in the chat. But not an easy question, but I am curious of your perspectives and opinion if AI is generally, and you can take any version of AI that you like, going to be a net benefit or net harm to our sustainable future. Boris, I'll start with you.
It's a fantastic question. And I would just say the story is yet to be written, but what we do today, and the way we approach this technology, the way we approach collaboration and transparency, or do not, that's going to reverberate for decades, if not centuries, in terms of impacts to not only our planet and our economy, but our society. And so I just I want this to be a call to action for folks that there is so much competition in this space, but we are all we all walk on the same planet, and we need to be more transparent and more collaborative when it comes to disclosing the environmental impacts of this technology. While we still do want to, keep pushing for the big moonshots, the big potential solutions that we see here.
Andrea.
I would say it depends. It depends if we do this right. And my favorite phrase is the best way to predict the future is to create it. So what everyone here in this webinar, that the people on this webinar talking, we are committed to making the world a more sustainable place for all, and that requires the right implementation of AI. So some will go wrong. Some people are not going to make the right decisions, but there's a lot of people that are going to make the right decisions, and we will keep building that future. Now that will require, again, that you think about the problem holistically, and we need leadership. We need the C-suite and the investors of companies to take a position and to define, are they just going to use AI to drive productivity at all costs and return on investment, or are they committed to building a more sustainable future? We are the team that's going to help build a more sustainable future, and we hope that you join us.
We'll do Leah and then Praveen, and then we'll move it over to the Q&A.
Yeah, I think I made it very clear that I believe in the net benefit, of course. I just have such belief in our founders, and although headlines always lean a certain way, there are obviously folks out there. I don't think anybody is actively, at least from the technology and company front, trying to create like a bad or evil Terminator technology. The moonshots that we're seeing that are phenomenal, from AlphaFold to some of the MIT researchers who found compounds to find antibiotics that can deal with MRSA or antibiotic-resistant bacteria, like massive problems humanity is currently struggling with. We were already seeing net benefits. So yes, while there are problems and harms today that we need to address, I still see that there's going to be a net benefit, and that's because of the people developing the technology that I truly believe in, and I believe have a vision of the future that they want to live in. They're creating the technology for that. So that's my perspective. I'm happy to chat about it with anybody else.
So I'm on the same page. I see significant net benefit. Why? So on the positive side, I think it's very, very difficult to decarbonize without the insights that you get from AI, without the innovation, the acceleration in R&D. So that's the positive side. On the negative side, I think a lot of those problems, they are solvable, right? Powering data centers with renewable power, that is solvable. Governing models, solvable. Doing it smart, doing the things that Andrea described, a lot of our clients are already doing it. We're all advocating it. Hopefully we do an okay job of what we're doing, right? So those things can be solved as well. And so I think on long term, significant net benefit.
Yes, and in case anyone was curious, I am also a cautious optimist in this space. So to take it down from all that optimism, let's talk about regulation. Just kidding. So, there was a question about, sorry, where does regulation, in your opinion, sit in this conversation? Like, what can we or regulators do to put guardrails? We've seen the good fun of how challenging it is to regulate AI. The EU AI Act has some considerations of sustainability and environmental impact, but it hasn't been, a large part of the regulatory conversation because it's already complex enough. So curious, do you think that regulation is going to have a part to play in making sure this goes the direction we all want it to go? Open to all panelists.
Happy to kick it off. We do think that regulation will play an important role. We actually recently put out our sustainable AI policy principles, which we're collaborating with our government affairs folks on to help influence and advocate for certain policies around disclosure of environmental impacts, potentially considering environmental impact as a risk. So for a lot of these regulations, they're risk-based, which we do support, but the risks are not necessarily defined by environmental impacts, and we think that's one thing. But on the other hand, we also think governments and regulation play a huge role in catalyzing a lot of this innovation as well. So we think it's important kind of on both sides.
I'd like to add, I have worked in the policy space in New York, and I think regulations play a critical role, but we are a bit outdated in the way that we develop regulations and we implement regulations. The speed at which technology is moving is way faster than the speed at which we are implementing regulations that are actually going to actually help regulate the development of technology. Technology is evolving and moving way faster than we are regulating it today. So we need a whole new approach to regulations and to the implementation of regulations if we are not Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper that's not moving the needle. And that's, I think, today my biggest concern is that technology, it's out there, generates harm that we didn't see, and then the regulation comes out. We need a different speed, considering that now we are dealing with a technology that it's evolving 24/7.
Just quickly add, since it's lightning round, we see, because things are moving so quickly, raise and some of the frameworks that other private capitals put into place as a means of starting to self-regulate and have these intellectual conversations as it's dynamic. The problem is a lot of this regulation is set on a transformer-based architecture. As we learn about things, it's going to change. We regulate nuclear physics based on the underlying science. There was a massive paper that came out looking at 200 plus questions that we need to answer around the underlying technologies of transformer-based architecture in large language models and generative models. So we have to stay on top of this, and we have to work together as different groups of society. But the most important thing is that we have interoperable regulation as it occurs, so we can continue to innovate and continue to have these conversations in spaces, but make sure that we're not being counterproductive against each other as we're trying to understand, learn, do the science, and regulate appropriately.
Praveen, if you have no addition, if you want, no need to.
Not really. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm not in a position to, but I'm sure I can share some of our thoughts on, from our government affairs team on policy. Yeah.
And I think, Leah, you bring up a really good point about some of these things that are not regulation, that sit kind of at that market intersection or standards that can move a little bit more quickly with a little bit more agility, that give those frameworks and those requirements. And so the lack of regulation should not be an abdication from responsibility, and seeking that responsibility is key. And I think that there's been significant call to action from this group, so I'd love to see it. We have 2 minutes left, so I have, there was a really great chat that kind of came in at the end here. So AI can process and analyze vast amounts of data, but human expertise is still critical and crucial in sustainability and ESG initiatives. So how are you seeing the collaboration between AI systems and human decision makers evolving? And is there any best practices for ensuring that those things continue to stay in lockstep together?
I can start. So the decisions are, by and large, and for the foreseeable future, will be made by humans. So I'll give you an example. If you're a large-scale industrial company, you're investing in panels, you're investing in storage, you're using AI to optimize and make the most of weather patterns and what we call the duck curve, right? So when it's very sunny in Texas or California, that's a good time to dispatch. There's still going to be people that make the final decision. You're just getting insights, and you're going to get insights on large and mass scale. It's just doing things faster, quicker, or in ways you never would have thought of. But ultimately, humans are always going to be in the loop, at least in the world of sustainability.
Well, we're bumping up right against time. This was an amazing conversation, and I think hopefully the panelists and the participants now have different ways of looking at this problem from different angles. And I think there was a significant call to action from everyone on the panel about how we need to, Boris, I think you put it like an aha moment for me, like this is going to impact the future centuries, which is no small feat, but I have a lot of confidence in the ecosystem to grapple with it. So thank you so much to everyone that attended. There will be a recording, so please follow our website and our LinkedIn. There's some great links in the chat from everybody as well. So virtual round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much for this conversation and for all the prep leading up to it. And I hope everyone has a really enjoyable rest of their week and summer.
Thanks so much. It's been great. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.